Ranger didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just stood there, motionless, ears high, body rigid, eyes locked onto the three silhouettes stepping off the dune and down toward the shoreline. The sand beneath their boots sank slightly with each step, but the German shepherd didn't flinch, not even a twitch. Logan Barrett's hand tightened around the rim of his wheelchair. The wind off the Pacific was cold, but not enough to explain the sudden chill racing through his chest. It wasn't the ocean that made him uneasy. It was instinct. He'd learned to trust it back in Kandahar, and he trusted it now. "Easy," Logan said softly, barely audible over the crash of distant waves. But Ranger didn't ease up. He lowered his head just slightly, his amber eyes narrowing like a sniper lining up a shot. To Logan's left, Tank, a broad-shouldered Rottweiler, shifted his weight forward, blocking Logan's exposed side without being asked. On the right, Bolt, a lean and alert Doberman, paced a half-step ahead, ears twitching with tension. Together they formed a wall. The bikers were now 30 feet away. No helmets, no smiles. The one in front walked with a cocky stride and a glint in his eye that didn't match the lazy arc of his movement. He was tall, wiry, sun-beaten. A scar split his cheek like a crude piece of art someone had tried to erase but failed. "Nice day for a walk," the man called out. Logan didn't respond right away. He kept his expression unreadable, shoulders square despite the ache settling into his back. "Didn't think this beach was on the tourist map," Logan said finally. "Guess we like off-the-grid spots," the biker replied, eyes scanning the dogs. "And hey, we couldn't help but notice. Those are some fine animals you got." Logan didn't miss the way the man's fingers twitched. Not from cold, from calculation. The second biker, younger, blonde, with a hard set to his jaw, gave a short chuckle and said, "They trained, or just mean-looking." Bolt let out a sharp bark, like a warning shot. "They're trained," Logan said, "and they don't like being stared at." Scar smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "Relax, Marine. We're just saying hi." Logan didn't relax. Neither did the dogs. The third man, heavier, dark eyes twitching behind a smeared pair of sunglasses, stepped a little closer than the others. His boot dragged through the sand, leaving a crooked line behind. Ranger growled then. Low, focused. Scar lifted his hand slightly, as if calling off an unseen attack. But the air shifted. Something in his posture changed. "Tell you what," Scar said, voice quieter now. "We'll be seeing you around." He turned like it was nothing, like he hadn't just scanned Logan's position, the house visible on the cliff above, the ramp leading up the dune. All three walked away slowly, like they had all the time in the world. But none of them turned their backs until they reached the bikes waiting in the lot. Logan watched until they disappeared over the bluff. Tank sat down beside him, exhaled like a bodyguard stepping off duty. Bolt circled once, restless. Ranger stayed where he was, still eyes tracking the horizon. Only when Logan gently touched the side of Ranger's neck did the dog finally blink and turn his head. "I saw it too," Logan murmured. "That wasn't a visit." He wheeled back toward the house, the wind stronger now. In the distance, the sun had begun to slide toward the water, casting the ocean in streaks of gold and fire. He didn't need a warning. Scar's kind didn't talk twice, and next time they wouldn't show up empty-handed. What troubled Logan most wasn't the threat. It was how calm the men had been, like they already knew the layout, like they'd been watching. As he reached the base of the ramp, Ranger paused and looked over his shoulder, one last time. Logan followed his gaze. Nothing moved, just a seagull wheeling in the sky. But the stillness had changed. Whatever peace Logan had found in Havenport was no longer untouched. He was a Marine. He didn't scare easy. But tonight he was going to reinforce the back gate. And tomorrow the dogs were going back on full training protocol. Because when war knocks, you don't ask if it's coming for you. You prepare. The mornings in Havenport had their own kind of silence, salt-stained and bird-fringed. Logan Barrett had grown to appreciate it, not because it was peaceful, but because it was predictable. He pushed open the back door with one gloved hand, the other gripping the wheel of his chair. The metal clicked softly as it rolled onto the deck. Below him, the backyard stretched modestly toward a weathered fence, a lone oak tree casting long shadows in the soft morning sun. Ranger was already out there, sitting with a sentinel's stillness at the edge of the lawn. His sable coat caught the early light like brushed copper. His ears stayed up. He didn't fidget, didn't break focus. If there was a rustle 2 blocks away, Ranger heard it first. "Clear perimeter again?" Logan asked. The dog didn't look back, just gave one quiet breath through his nose. Affirmation enough. Tank came lumbering out a second later, shaking his heavy frame with a grunt. His broad Rottweiler shoulders rocked side to side with each step, black and rust fur gleaming. Where Ranger was a scalpel, Tank was a sledgehammer wrapped in velvet. He walked slow, but with purpose. A bodyguard in every sense of the word. And Bolt, of course, never walked anywhere. The Doberman shot out the door with a burst of lean, twitchy energy, spinning once in the grass before skidding to a halt in front of Logan's chair. "Too early for your dramatics," Logan muttered. Bolt barked once, sharp and bright, tongue lolling sideways. If Ranger was the general and Tank the enforcer, Bolt was the wild card, too fast, too reactive, but heart wired to Logan like a second. Pulsar. The 4 of them formed a unit now, not just man and dogs. Something tighter. Something earned. Logan wheeled down the ramp, the aluminum clinking beneath the tires. He hated ramps, not for what they were, but what they meant. For a man who'd once scaled desert walls in full gear, who'd run toward gunfire with breath held steady and boots locked firm, it was a slow, humbling betrayal of memory. But the dogs never pitied him, and that, more than anything, made them his lifeline. He rolled to the middle of the yard and gave the signal. Palm flat, stay, fist, alert, 2 fingers forward, sweep. Ranger moved first, silent and smooth, crossing diagonally towards the shed. Bolt darted wide, sniffing at the fence line. Tank held center, his head swaying slightly, reading scent and sound like a tank with sonar. Logan adjusted the grip on his lapboard clipboard, tracking their timing. He didn't call this play. This was muscle memory, discipline, control. These drills weren't leftovers from his days in the Corps. They were his way of staying whole. 10 minutes into the session, Ranger stopped cold near the far corner of the fence. His body stiffened, head dipped slightly, ears tilted forward. Logan's pulse jumped. "Talk to me," he said under his breath, rolling forward. Tank moved in behind Ranger, posture sharpening. Bolt froze mid-step. Logan didn't hear anything at first. Then he did. A sound barely above the wind. It was a low scraping. Metal on wood. He wheeled faster, eyes scanning. A quick scan of the perimeter turned up nothing, no footprints, no gaps in the fence. But the latch on the back gate. Slightly shifted, not broken, not open, but moved. Ranger stared at it. Didn't approach, just held point. Logan wheeled up beside him, looking over the fence. No one. He clicked his tongue. Sweep wide, stay visual. Bolt peeled off instantly, checking both sides of the yard. Tank backed up, covering Logan's right. The gate hadn't been tampered with. Not completely, but someone had touched it. That didn't happen by accident. Logan locked the gate, double-checked it, then turned back toward the house. "Back in," he ordered. The dogs obeyed, but not easily. Even Bolt, normally eager to chase birds or bite training sleeves, was stiff. Inside, Logan leaned against the kitchen counter and removed his gloves. His shoulder ached from the sudden tension. He set down the clipboard and looked at the clock. Not even 8:30 a.m. The coffee had gone cold. Ranger's reaction had saved him once, years ago, in Afghanistan. The original Ranger had caught a whiff of ammonium nitrate under a dirt path and halted just long enough to save Logan's unit from being vaporized by a buried IED. Ranger had died a month later in a night raid that went wrong. Logan had carried the scar, not on his skin, but in his throat, in the way he didn't speak about certain nights. He hadn't meant to adopt again. But when the VA therapist brought up canine companions, something clicked. One dog turned into 3. Rescue cases. High energy. Too much for most people, but not too much for a Marine. The new Ranger, so named because Logan had seen that same calculating steadiness in his eyes, was the first to bond. Bolt was second, crashing into Logan's life like a freight train. And Tank? He'd been the last piece. An old shelter said he was too aggressive. Logan saw otherwise. He trained them hard, loved them harder. They learned commands, but they also learned him. His silences, his shoulder pain, the nights he startled awake drenched in cold sweat. Ranger would stand beside the bed until Logan's breathing returned to normal. Tank would curl at the foot, anchoring the world. Bolt would nudge his elbow with a squeaky toy, breaking the tension in his own weird way. These weren't just dogs. They were his unit now. That morning, after rechecking the locks and walking the yard again, Logan sat on the porch. The dogs sprawled around him, more at ease now, but still glancing at the gate every so often. And then the mail truck stopped. He watched as the driver stepped out, slid a padded envelope into the box, then climbed back in. Logan wheeled down to check. No return address. Just his name, scrawled in tight, slanted handwriting. Inside was a single object, a leather dog tag. Not military, homemade. Etched crudely across the surface was one word. Stay. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and wheeled back up the porch. The dogs followed. Training resumed that afternoon. This time, they weren't just preparing for drills. They were preparing for war. The first thing Logan heard was the sound. Low and deep at first, like a warning rumble before a quake. Then came the engines, 3 of them. Growling. Closer. He was on the south end of the beach trail, where the slope from the parking lot met the hard-packed shoreline. A place most people didn't bother with, too far from the boardwalk, too close to the dunes. The wind was stiff off the ocean. Ranger walked slightly ahead, his gait steady. Tank was at Logan's side, matching his wheelchair's slow, rhythmic movement. Bolt zipped ahead and back, ears sharp, tail swinging like a pendulum of tension. Logan had planned on a short session, some off-leash drills, maybe scent work. But when he heard the engines, he stopped cold. The dogs stopped too. They felt it. From the corner of his eye, Logan saw them, 3 bikes descending the slope with too much confidence, too little care for where they were. Salt sprayed off the tires as they cut across the sand. He didn't recognize the riders, not locals, and they weren't here for the ocean view. The lead rider slowed first. He swung one leg off the bike, planted his boots in the sand, and pulled off his helmet with a fluid motion like someone used to making people wait before a threat became a statement. His face said it all. Scar Weller. Scar was the kind of man who walked into a bar and made the jukebox skip. Mid-30s, lean and leathery, with a long scar slicing down the left side of his face, curved like a sneer frozen in skin. His eyes were darker than smoke and twice as unreadable. The second biker was broader, all neck and shoulders. The third had a weasel's twitch and a laugh already building in his throat. Both leaned on their handlebars, not bothering with helmets. Scar stepped forward, dragging his boots across the sand like he owned the beach. His gaze flicked over Logan, then landed on the dogs. "Well, hell," he said, grinning. "Looks like we've got ourselves a war hero and his little army." Ranger shifted forward 1 inch. That was all, but it was enough. His lips parted just slightly. A low growl built deep in his chest. Not loud, not for show. A real warning. Tank moved in sync, stepping in front of Logan's wheelchair, shoulders square, head low. Bolt stayed pressed to Logan's side, his breathing quick, ready to launch or protect at the drop of a tone. Logan didn't move. His voice, when it came, was quiet but clear. "Morning." Scar tilted his head. "That what this is?" The other two laughed. Short, mean. Scar kept walking, closing the space to just outside arm's reach. "You always roll around with this much backup?" he asked. Logan shrugged. "You roll around with 2 lackeys. I roll with loyalty." Scar's smile faltered for half a second, then returned. "You always talk that fancy, or is that the chair talking?" Logan's jaw twitched. Ranger's growl deepened. Scar turned his head toward the shepherd. "Easy there, killer." He reached slightly toward his belt, maybe for a cigarette, maybe just to test a reaction. He got one. Ranger took 2 deliberate steps forward, placing himself between Logan and Scar, eyes locked, stance set. Not a bluff, not a maybe. Scar froze, eyes narrowing. "I wouldn't," Logan said flatly. Scar slowly raised both hands. All right. Guess the rumors are true. You and your dogs don't play around." "Not when someone walks up like they're casing the place." Scar chuckled, but it was dry. "I'm just saying hello, Marine. No crime in being friendly." Logan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The wind blew harder now. Sand swept across Scar's boots. Scar looked down, brushed off one pant leg, then glanced up again. "I like you," he said. "Reminds me of the guys we used to meet back in the day. Always so sure of themselves, until they weren't." He turned to go. "See you around, Marine," he added over his shoulder. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. The engines roared to life one after the other. Scar didn't look back. His 2 cronies smirked as they followed. The sound of them tearing across the sand was loud and ugly. Logan sat still for a beat after they were gone. The only sound now was the surf. Ranger finally eased back to his side. Tank stood, unmoving, still staring down the last trail of dust. Bolt circled once, then pressed his head against Logan's knee. "That wasn't random," Logan said softly. Ranger looked up at him. "You felt it too, huh?" The dog didn't blink. Logan stared out at the empty trail where the bikes had vanished. His gut twisted the way it used to just before the first shot broke a silent night. He didn't know when Scar would come back, but he knew he would. And next time, it wouldn't be just words. The rhythm of Havenport's Main Street had always been a comfort. Brick sidewalks, hand-painted signs, the occasional clang of a flagpole rope tapping in the wind. Logan rolled past familiar shops, the bait store, the bakery, the little antique place with the crooked clock in the window. Tank walked at his left flank, a slow-moving shadow of muscle. Bolt zigzagged out front, sniffing lamp posts and flower beds like the town was his, and everyone just lived in it. Ranger, as always, was steady and silent, watching everything, scanning the windows, the rooftops, the shifting flow of strangers. He missed nothing. The grocery bag on Logan's lap rustled as a breeze cut down the street. A carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, a few apples, normal stuff. That's what the morning had been. Quiet, predictable. Until the engine sound started again. They came from behind, same guttural growl, low and familiar like a bad memory. Logan's jaw clenched before he turned. Scar's bike led the way, flanked by 2 others. Same patchwork leather, same ugly attitude. They weren't speeding. That wasn't their style. They moved with a slow prowl, tires humming like a wasp nest waiting to burst. Logan veered toward the curb, planning to pull over and let them pass. But they didn't pass. They stopped. Scar killed the engine first. His boots crunched on the sidewalk behind Logan. The street had thinned. The lunch crowd had passed. A distant gull called once, then quieted. Logan looked for witnesses. Nothing but the reflection of his own stillness in a hardware store window. Scar's voice came soft. Too soft. Didn't expect to run into you again so soon. Logan didn't reply. Scar walked closer, boots scraping. You see, he said. Last time. That wasn't personal, just checking you out. But then you had your little security team make a scene. Felt disrespectful. Ranger moved first. He angled his body between Scar and Logan, fur raised like quills along his spine. He didn't growl yet. Not until the second biker flanked the sidewalk and stepped in from the left, boxing them in near the alley between a closed deli and the laundromat. That's when the sound came. Not a bark, a snarl, low and pure and ancient, from deep in Ranger's chest. Scar froze mid-step. Tank's position shifted subtly. Not aggressive, but ready. Coiled. His weight dropped onto his back legs, nose twitching towards the threat. Bolt didn't hesitate. He barked once, sharp and urgent, a sound that echoed up the alley walls like a siren. Scar raised his hand slightly, palms open, mock surrender. Whoa! Settle down, boys. We're just talking. Logan's voice cut in, low but firm. Back off. Scar chuckled. Not much room to back off when you're blocking the only road out. He nodded toward the alley. You and me, just a word. Logan narrowed his eyes. You don't want what happens next. Scar's expression darkened. You sure? Before Logan could answer, a new sound sliced through the tension. Bootsteps. From the far end of the alley, a figure emerged. A patrol officer, mid-30s, crisp navy uniform, eyes sharp behind dark sunglasses. She walked with authority, one hand near her radio, the other hovering by her belt. Everything okay here? She asked, voice clear. Scar's whole demeanor changed. He stepped back, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just catching up with an old friend, he said smoothly. Logan didn't break eye contact. Ranger stayed locked on Scar, tail stiff, body still trembling slightly with tension. The officer looked between them, then down at the dogs. They don't seem thrilled about your reunion. Scar shrugged. Some people don't appreciate good company. The officer stepped forward. Badge read. Officer Erin Niles. Calm voice, centered stance. Let's take the reunion elsewhere, she said, before things go sideways. Scar held Logan's gaze for one more beat, then leaned in, close enough that Logan could smell the cigarette smoke in his collar and the faint odor of gasoline clinging to his jacket. He whispered, just loud enough. Next time there won't be witnesses. Logan didn't flinch. Scar smiled, winked at Officer Niles, and walked back to his bike. The others followed, climbing on and peeling out with just enough rev to spray grit onto Logan's wheels. Officer Niles watched them vanish down the hill. You good? She asked. Logan nodded once. For now. Her eyes stayed on him a moment longer. Then, with a quick salute to the dogs, she turned and walked off, radioing in something about routine street disturbance, dispersed without incident. Logan sat still for a long moment, breathing through the fire starting in his chest. Ranger finally relaxed a fraction, brushing his nose against Logan's shoulder like a check-in. Tank stepped in behind him, pressing close. Bolt did a quick circle, then stared up at Logan like asking what came next. Logan exhaled and looked down the alley where Scar had stood. It was never about the words, it was about intent. And Scar had made his clear. Rain had soaked Havenport overnight, leaving the morning grey and sluggish. Drops still clung to the eaves and ran in long, slow streaks down Logan's window. The backyard looked like a painting left out in a storm. Muddy earth, bent grass, the old oak dripping from every branch. Logan sat at the kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee. Ranger lay stretched at the sliding glass door, his head resting between his paws, but his ears never stopped moving. Bolt paced near the cabinets, his energy coiled tight despite the dampness outside. Tank sat with his back to the stove, eyes on Logan, reading him the way only he could. A normal morning. Almost, until Logan looked out and saw it. He blinked once, leaned forward. Hanging from the fence post in the back corner of the yard, just beyond the shed, was a helmet. Matte black, streaked with scratches. The chin strap dangled loosely, swaying in the drizzle. It hadn't been there last night, and it sure as hell didn't blow in with the wind. Logan pushed back from the table, already reaching for his gloves. "Ranger," he said sharply. The shepherd stood instantly, head turning to follow Logan's line of sight. His body stiffened. Then a growl. Low, controlled, certain. Bolt rushed to the door before Logan could speak, tail stiff, paws scratching once against the frame. Tank rose silently, positioning himself between Logan and the window. Logan wheeled closer, eyes locked on the helmet. "Stay," he told them. "Wait for my call." Outside, the rain was soft but cold. The ramp was slick, so he gripped the wheels tightly, easing his way down. Ranger followed without waiting for permission. Logan didn't stop him. As he reached the yard, the wind shifted just enough to turn the helmet. A piece of a decal, half peeled, showed what looked like a skull with jagged teeth. Logan had seen that before, on Scar's vest. He moved closer, stopping just short of the post. The helmet had weight. It hung deliberately, not tossed or dropped. This was a message. His fingers hesitated before taking it down. It was cold, damp, and smelled faintly of gasoline and rain-wet leather. Beneath the brim, he could see fingerprints, smudged along the edge, too faint for detail but clear in intent. Ranger stood beside him, unmoving. Bolt and Tank prowled the fence line, noses to the ground, tails stiff, ears high. Bolt barked once, short, sharp, then went silent again. The gate was still latched from the inside, which meant someone had been in the yard. They'd come in, left it, then walked away like nothing happened. Logan turned the helmet over, then scanned the grass. Tracks were faint, just softened patches of mud, no clear tread. But there had definitely been movement. He backed up, still holding the helmet. His mind moved faster now, calculating timelines, vulnerabilities. His camera system? No alerts. But the heavy rain might have blocked motion sensors. Or maybe Scar had found the blind spots. Back inside, he placed the helmet on the kitchen counter, then grabbed his phone. 10 minutes later, he was sitting in the Havenport substation, across from Officer Laura McKay. Her uniform was pressed, hair tight in a bun, and her pen moved steadily as Logan spoke. "You're sure it wasn't there last night?" she asked. "I would have seen it." McKay sighed, tapping the pen once against the notepad. "Scarweller," she repeated. "He's not officially flagged in the state database. But yeah, we've heard of him. Motorcycle club types, known for intimidation tactics, no convictions." Logan handed her the helmet. "He was here. That's not intimidation. That's a breach." She turned it over, sniffed. "Gasoline. He's marking territory." Laura nodded slowly, but didn't look hopeful. "It's not that we don't take it seriously, Logan, but unless he's caught trespassing or threatening someone directly, we've got very little to hold him on." "What about prints? We can run them," But without a record, they won't match to anything. Silence stretched. The walls hummed faintly under the buzz of overhead lights. Then Logan said, "This isn't random." "He's circling." McKay looked up, her face softening just slightly. "Then maybe it's time we circle back harder." He left the station 10 minutes later, empty-handed except for a copy of the incident report and a line from McKay. "You stay sharp, and don't let those boys out of your sight." Back home, the house felt different. Not violated, just watched. Ranger sat in the front room, positioned to see both the front door and the hallway. Tank was curled near the back door, nose resting across the threshold. Bolt kept moving, patrolling rooms, checking windows, occasionally pausing to glance at Logan, as if asking, "Why aren't we hunting?" Logan rolled into his office, eyes lingering on a framed photo of his old unit. Beside it, the shadow box holding his father's bronze star. His grandfather's Navy KABAR sat in a locked drawer, a folded flag in the corner. They weren't just heirlooms, they were targets now. Scar wasn't after money. He was after something harder to trace. Sentiment, symbols, and he was willing to step onto Logan's ground to get them. That night, the rain came again. But Logan stayed up later than usual, lights off, blinds open just enough for a clear view. The dogs didn't sleep either. They rotated stations like guards on shift. He didn't tell them to. They just knew. The wind picked up sometime around midnight. Something clattered 2 houses down. Logan didn't blink. The dogs didn't move. And in that stillness, he realized the most dangerous part of this wasn't Scar's intrusion. It was the waiting for the next sound, the next shadow, the next move. He didn't know when it would come, but he knew what he'd do when it did. And so did Ranger. The first thunderclap rattled the windows just before midnight. Logan was already awake. Storms didn't bother him, not in the way they bothered others. He'd slept through rocket attacks. But tonight there was a different edge to the wind, a weight in the air that settled into the bones. He'd felt it all day, the pressure building, the temperature dropping too fast. The quiet had been too quiet. Outside, rain pounded the roof in uneven bursts. Logan sat near the front window, the lamp off, one hand loosely resting on the arm of his chair. Ranger lay across the threshold of the hallway, ears erect, body still. Bolt moved between the windows, restless. Tank was parked near the back door, his chest rising slow and deep like a furnace on standby. Then came the growl. It was Ranger, low, not angry, focused. Logan froze. Ranger didn't growl unless something was wrong. He wheeled quietly to the back of the house, rain whispering against the glass panes. Tank stood up as he approached, posture shifting to that of a dog ready to work. Bolt barked sharply once from the kitchen. Ranger moved fast, positioning himself between Logan and the back door, his body tight as a wire. That's when Logan saw it. Their attention wasn't random. All 3 dogs were locked in on the same spot, the corner of the yard, where the oak tree met the back fence. Something was out there. He grabbed the flashlight from the shelf by the door. No words. The dogs didn't need instruction. They knew the drill. The rain had turned sideways, slashing at the porch when he opened the door. Wind pushed hard against the frame, and lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the yard in white for a split second. Logan eased down the ramp, tires slick on the wet wood. Ranger moved beside him, steps slow, methodical. Bolt darted to the edge of the yard, then stopped, nose twitching. Tank followed, flanking wide. They were working together, communicating in a way only dogs could, through looks, through pace, through instinct. Logan swept the flashlight across the grass. And there it was, near the shed, in the shallow mud, clearer than it had any right to be, was a single boot print. Fresh, deep. He wheeled closer, eyes narrowing. The tread wasn't familiar. It wasn't his. And it wasn't old. It was new. Rain hadn't had time to wash it away. Whoever had been here, it wasn't long ago, maybe minutes. He spun the chair, flashlight moving fast across the fence line. No broken boards, no gate hanging open, just the print. One message. We were here. Ranger pressed against Logan's left leg, his head tilted, watching the trees beyond the fence. Tank stood at the perimeter, muscles tight, growling low. Bolt let out another bark, this one more urgent. Logan backed up. Quickly now. He knew what this was. Scar hadn't just come to intimidate, he was testing distance, timing, response. The helmet on the fence had been a message. This was a probe. Back inside, Logan toweled the dogs one by one, his hands fast but focused. Ranger stood still for him, eyes never leaving the windows. Bolt paced as soon as he was dry. Tank sat by the back door, water still dripping from his jowls, unmoved. Logan locked every window, secured the deadbolts, pulled the generator checklist from the drawer and began running through it in his head. He turned on the indoor cam monitors. Static, flickered. The rain was interfering again, but it didn't matter. He wasn't going to rely on electronics anymore. It was time to shift gears. No more hoping they'd stay away. Logan moved into the office. From the locked drawer he retrieved the training rig. Vests, tethers, muzzle gear, bite sleeves. It wasn't for show. It was protocol from a previous life. The one he thought he'd left behind when his legs stopped listening. But his arms still worked. And so did the dogs. The next morning, before the rain stopped, training resumed. Harder, faster, real scenarios. Logan sat in the middle of the yard with a pack of scent markers and simulated threat tools. Ranger was the control. Tank was perimeter. Bolt ran retrieval. They moved like ghosts across the wet grass. Bolt zigzagged until he found the leather pouch hidden behind the water barrel. Tank paced the fence, watching both the alley and the neighbor's lot. Ranger stood at Logan's side, scanning every corner. Logan threw distractions, recorded motorcycle sounds, slammed metal rods together. Rain didn't matter. Thunder didn't shake them. Every command was followed. Every pause was calculated. By late afternoon, Logan was soaked to the bone, shoulders burning from the wheels. But he didn't stop until the drills were perfect. At one point he looked at Ranger, his closest shadow, the anchor in his storm, and said quietly, "He's coming back. You know it, don't you?" Ranger didn't bark, but he stared into the distance like he already knew the when. Scar had crossed the line. Now Logan and his unit were ready to hold it. The lights cut out just after 11 p.m. No warning, no flicker. 1 second the living room was bathed in the soft glow of the table lamp. Then darkness. The hum of the fridge stopped. The clock on the microwave went black. The heater sighed into silence. Logan didn't move. Neither did Ranger. The shepherd stood by the window, ears up, body stiff, tail barely twitching. Tank sat at the back door, head tilted, nose lifted like he was tasting the change in the air. Bolt padded across the hardwood floor from the hallway, silent, like a shadow on 4 legs. Logan reached for the flashlight on the side table, clicked it on. Nothing. Dead batteries. The backup generator in the shed should have kicked in, but it hadn't. That was when the thunder rolled. But it didn't sound right. Too steady. Too metallic. Logan froze. Breath caught. That wasn't thunder. It was footsteps. Boots on wet soil. 3 sets, moving fast, closing in. Then came the sharp clack of metal, fence wire being tugged. Logan wheeled toward the kitchen, muscles tense, hand reaching for the emergency radio on the wall. He flicked it on. Nothing. They'd cut the line. Ranger growled, quiet but lethal. The back door shook once, then again. Then it exploded inward. The lock gave under the weight of a steel boot, the door cracking into the wall. Scar came through first. Water dripped from his jacket, his scar stark in the dim moonlight bleeding through the windows. His eyes locked on Logan. Cold, empty. Behind him, 2 others followed, one broad with sleeves of tattoos, the other wiry with a knife already drawn. Scar grinned. "Told you I'd come back when you weren't ready." Logan tried to turn his chair, to reach the baton resting on the edge of the couch. But Scar moved fast, slamming into him shoulder first. The wheelchair tipped. Logan hit the floor hard, the breath knocked from his chest. Pain seared down his arm. His hand slapped the hardwood, searching for anything to brace himself. Scar leaned in, boots planted on either side of Logan's legs. "You should have stayed quiet, Marine." Then he heard it. Not a growl, not a bark, a coordinated charge. Ranger hit Scar like a missile, latching onto his forearm with precision. Not wild, not vicious, tactical. His jaws locked just below the elbow, clamping down through leather and flesh. Scar screamed, trying to pull back, but Ranger held tight, his body low, his legs braced, snarling as he twisted just enough to knock Scar off balance. The second man lunged forward, but Tank was already there. He barreled into the man's side, a wall of muscle and fury. The intruder crashed into the counter, head bouncing off the cabinet door with a thud. The third man turned, knife up, but Bolt moved like lightning. He launched from the hallway, legs fully extended, and slammed into the man's chest. The impact knocked the air from his lungs, sending him sprawling backward into the bookshelf. Logan struggled upright, bracing himself on the arm of the tipped wheelchair. "Hold!" he commanded. Instantly, Ranger stopped shaking, holding Scar in place but not advancing. Blood dripped onto the floor. Scar writhed beneath him, teeth clenched, trying to pry the dog's mouth open. Tank stood over the second man, one paw on the guy's shoulder, growling low and deep. Bolt circled the third, forcing him to stay pinned against the wall. Then the sirens came. Someone had heard the crash. Or the scream. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe divine timing. Red and blue lights flared outside the window. Doors slammed. Boots approached fast. The front door burst open. Officer Ramirez stepped in first, sidearm drawn, eyes sweeping. "Don't shoot!" Logan called. "They're down. The dogs are holding them." Ramirez froze, then lowered his weapon. Lindsay, his partner, moved in behind him, cuffs already out. They swept through the house, weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Hands where we can see them!" Scar didn't resist. His face was pale, sweat mixing with rainwater and blood. He didn't look at Logan. Didn't look at the dogs. Only when Ramirez cuffed him did he whisper, "You trained them like soldiers." "No," Logan said from the floor. "I trained them like family." Within minutes, the house was filled with law enforcement, EMTs, and the scent of wet clothing and burned adrenaline. Logan refused the ambulance, choosing instead to sit on the floor with his back against the cabinet, breathing steady. Ranger came to him first, muzzle wet, blood speckled across his coat. He leaned into Logan gently, eyes full of alert loyalty. Logan wrapped an arm around his neck. Tank flopped beside him next, pressing his bulk against Logan's other side. Bolt sat on the rug, still watching the front door as officers moved in and out. They hadn't just held the line. They'd won the fight. Together. The war scar thought he'd bring to Logan's doorstep had already been fought and finished, by 3 dogs who didn't need guns or badges to know what it meant to protect their own. The morning after the break-in was unnervingly quiet, the kind of quiet that settled only after something violent had torn through. Sunlight broke through low clouds, casting a faint golden shimmer on the wet pavement outside Logan's home. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like storm, earthy, sharp, unsettled. Wind rattled the chimes on the neighbor's porch across the street, and a seagull wheeled overhead, calling out once before disappearing toward the bay. Inside, Logan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee cooling between his hands. His shoulder throbbed from the fall, but he didn't flinch. The bandage on his forearm felt tight, but clean. His ribs ached when he breathed too deep. Ranger lay at his feet, eyes open, head resting on his paws. Tank was stretched along the back door, the picture of calm, but his ears still tracked every sound. Bolt stood sentry at the window, tail flicking once in a while like he was daring anyone else to try. They were quiet, but it wasn't over. They knew it. So did Logan. At 8:42 a.m., there was a knock at the door. 3 taps. Firm, measured. Not Scar. Logan wheeled over and opened it. Standing on the front step was Police Chief Emmett Callahan. Late 50s, tall, square-shouldered, wearing a brown field jacket over his uniform and a calm, unreadable expression. A man who looked like he'd buried enough mistakes to know when to give credit where it was due. "Morning, Barrett," Callahan said. "Chief." Callahan held out a thick envelope with the seal of the Havenport Police Department stamped on the flap. "Thought this kind of thing deserved more than an email." Logan took the envelope but didn't open it. "You could have sent someone." "I could have," Callahan said, his voice steady. "But I watched the footage, heard the dispatch tapes, and I saw what those dogs did." He looked past Logan for a moment, into the house. Ranger had risen now, standing quietly behind Logan. Bolt remained near the window. Tank had gotten up too, posture easy but alert. "They weren't reacting," Callahan added. "They were working." Logan didn't answer right away. Callahan cleared his throat. "We've got 3 new K9 recruits, bright dogs, full of energy, and 2 good handlers. But they need something we can't teach in a classroom." Logan's brows lifted slightly. "We're asking," Callahan said plainly. "Would you consider working with us? Even just part-time? Training, drills, field scenarios? These dogs, they could learn a hell of a lot from yours. And from you." Logan was silent for a beat. Then he looked down at Ranger, who looked up as if he already knew what the answer would be. "They don't train easy," Logan said. "We don't need easy. We need right." Logan opened the envelope. Inside was a single-page letter, hand-signed by Callahan and 3 others from the department. It wasn't just a thank you, it was an official invitation. A badge number was already assigned. Not honorary. Real. At the bottom of the letter was a handwritten note in black ink. "Some heroes walk on 2 legs, some on 4. We saw what loyalty looks like last night. Havenport's safer because of you." Logan looked up. "I train hard." Callahan gave a faint smile. "Good. So do we." Behind him, the sound of another vehicle pulling up cut through the stillness. A black department SUV parked near the curb. Officer Niles stepped out, a new K9 trainee at her side, a young Belgian Malinois named Rio, barely 2 years old. Eager, slender, eyes sharp. She walked up and gave a nod. "He's green, but he's got potential." Rio looked past her immediately, locking eyes with Ranger. The shepherd didn't move, just watched. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. Calm, measured, let Rio sniff. Then walked a single circle around him, like a veteran inspecting a new recruit. Bolt wagged his tail, just once. Tank huffed. Logan watched, then turned back to Callahan. "We'll need a space." "The department's setting one up," Callahan said. "But if you want to use your yard to start." Logan looked back over his shoulder. His yard was still muddy from the storm. The shed door hung slightly askew. The grass was torn up near the fence where the fight had spilled out the night before. But it was home. He turned back. "We'll start here." As the officers left, Logan remained at the door, watching Rio trot beside Niles with a spring in his step. Ranger returned to his place at Logan's side without being told. No bark, no noise, just presence. Logan looked down. Back on duty, huh? Ranger blinked slowly, then faced forward. The house was quiet again. But this time, the quiet didn't feel like waiting. It felt like the beginning of something solid, something earned. And for the first time in a long while, Logan Barrett didn't feel like a man protecting what was left. He felt like someone building forward, one dog at a time. It started with a loaf of bread, a simple, warm, foil-wrapped sourdough left on the porch sometime before sunrise, still fragrant with rosemary and sea salt. No note, just a kindness. By noon, the porch was full. A small vase of wildflowers sat next to the bread, placed gently atop the old welcome mat. Next to it, a bag of dog treats tied with blue ribbon. Then came a stack of folded towels, 3 handmade collars with brass nameplates reading Ranger, Tank, and Bolt, and a child's drawing of 3 dogs standing in front of a small house, tails wagging. Someone had left training cones in a milk crate. Someone else had dropped off a new dog harness, heavy-duty, military-grade. Logan stepped onto the porch around 10 and just stood there, blinking into the cool morning light, the coastal breeze lifting the edges of the bakery foil. Ranger nudged past him to sniff the bread, but didn't take it. Tank lumbered out next and sniffed the flowers like he wasn't quite sure what they were. Bolt paused by the drawing and gave it a single lick before trotting down the steps to scan the street. It wasn't just a delivery. It was a message. Havenport had seen what happened, and they hadn't looked away. Logan spotted the TV truck later that afternoon. A local news crew parked at the curb, the side of the van reading Channel 6 Coastal News. He didn't speak to them. Didn't have to. The reporter stood across the street and quietly filmed the front of the house, where the gifts kept growing like a quiet tide. A moment later, the camera turned, and the lens caught Ranger as he stepped to the edge of the porch, chest high, eyes locked on the camera with quiet gravity. The footage aired that night. The headline read, "Veteran and his dogs defend home, defend town." They didn't show the fight. Didn't need to. What aired was a slow montage. Logan's home, the porch stacked with packages, kids holding hand-drawn signs that read, "Thank you, Ranger," and "Bolt is a hero." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. The next morning, a man from the Havenport hardware store showed up with a dolly cart and a clipboard. "Mr. Barrett?" he asked, adjusting his baseball cap. Logan nodded. "Owner says everything on this list's been covered. Training gear, fencing supplies, weatherproof lighting. Said to tell you it's on the house." His exact words. Logan stood still. The man cleared his throat. "Oh, and he also said, if Ranger ever wants to come by and inspect the stockroom, there's a rawhide bone waiting." Logan almost smiled. By midday, the street looked like the edge of a block party. People didn't knock. They just left things and kept walking. Neighbors he barely knew nodded in passing. Some waved from across the street. One older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Darby, approached the porch with a small basket covered in a checkered towel. Mrs. Darby's hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside were 3 hand-stitched dog bandanas, each embroidered with a different phrase. "Guardian," read the one for Ranger. "Protector," for Tank. "Lightning," for Bolt. Her eyes watered as she tied the first one around Ranger's neck. "For our boys," she whispered. Logan couldn't speak. He didn't need to. That night, Logan sat on the porch with the dogs spread around him. Ranger lay with his head resting on Logan's boot, still wearing his new bandana like a badge. Bolt curled at his side, tail thumping softly each time a car rolled by. Tank rested near the stairs, keeping watch even in the calm. The moon was soft and full overhead, and for once, Logan didn't feel like he had to keep scanning the dark. For the longest time, he'd chosen this town for its quiet, its tucked-away feel, a place to disappear. But now, he realized, he hadn't disappeared. He'd rooted, and Havenport had seen him. Not just the scars, not just the chair, but the man, the dogs, the team, not as broken pieces, but as protectors. He looked down at Ranger, gave a gentle pat to his shoulder. "We're not hiding anymore," he said. Ranger didn't move. He didn't have to. He already knew. The tide was still receding when Logan wheeled onto the damp sand, his boots tucked under the footrests of his all-terrain chair. Above him, the sky was brushed with soft orange, the kind that only came after a long, unforgiving storm. Ranger trotted ahead, ears forward, nose twitching in the breeze. Bolt ran wide circles in the surf, barking at foam like it owed him something. Tank lumbered along, a steady force of calm, his eyes scanning the horizon as if still on duty. This beach had once been the edge of Logan's retreat, a place he'd come to be forgotten. Now it was the beginning. Just up the dunes, a small group of officers waited in a loose semicircle. New faces, young, curious, nervous. Each held a leash in one hand, and next to them, 4 dogs sat alert. Fresh recruits, barely through the first weeks of obedience. A female officer stepped forward. Mid-20s, still had that wide-eyed mix of hope and grit. She adjusted her patrol cap and nodded toward Logan. "You really going to train us from down there?" she asked, not unkindly. Logan chuckled. "Down here's closer to the action." The officers laughed. The dogs didn't flinch. Logan raised 2 fingers. Ranger, without a sound, moved to the center of the group and sat, rigid, focused, every muscle waiting. "Watch his body," Logan said. "He'll show you what listening looks like before he even hears the command." He gave a quiet whistle, short, clipped. Ranger rose, turned a full circle, and lay down again, head between his paws. A few officers murmured under their breath. One dog barked and immediately got a correction from its handler. Another simply watched Ranger with wide, respectful eyes. "Let's begin," Logan said, shifting his weight slightly. Same commands, but from the ground up. He didn't need a whiteboard or a whistle or a clipboard. He had lived it. Ranger had lived it. And Bolt and Tank weren't just mascots. They were memory, instinct, and experience wrapped in fur and muscle. The session lasted an hour. They ran drills on the sand, using shells and towels and scent markers buried beneath damp driftwood. Bolt showed them how to sweep an area without wasting energy. Tank demonstrated what stillness looked like before a takedown. Ranger showed them patience, how to read the handler before the command even came. By the time they finished, the sun had broken full over the horizon. Logan turned his chair back toward the bluff, ready to roll. One of the young officers jogged up beside him, breathless, leash trailing. "Hey, sir," he said, eyes flicking from the dogs to Logan. "How'd you train them so well?" Logan looked down at Ranger, who stared back at him with that same quiet certainty he always had, the kind that had kept them alive in darker days, the kind that never needed to be loud to be understood. He reached out, rested a hand on Ranger's shoulder. "I didn't train them," he said softly. "We just learned to trust each other." The officer nodded, but didn't fully understand. Not yet. Maybe one day. As the others packed up, Logan lingered a moment longer on the sand. This place, this little slice of Havenport, had become something else now, not just the end of a fight, but the beginning of something worth building, a bridge between pain and purpose, between instinct and intention. And at the heart of it all stood 3 dogs who had refused to let him fall. As Logan wheeled back toward the trail, Ranger matched his pace. Bolt nudged Tank, who barked once, short and low, like a seal of approval. Above them, gulls cried. Behind them, footprints pressed into wet sand. One set of wheels, 3 sets of paws. A trail, a legacy, a promise, and maybe, just maybe, a reminder. What's your story with a loyal pet? Share it, honor it, because somewhere out there someone needs to hear it. And if you believe in the courage, loyalty, and quiet strength of dogs like Ranger, support our journey here at German Shepherd. Subscribe, follow, share. The story doesn't end here. It's only just begun.